You've probably never seen this man before. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if no one who watches this video has ever even heard of him. This is Billy Murray, and he may be the best-selling musician ever. It hardly took more than asking nicely for Murray to sing a song, who recorded an estimated 6,000 to 10,000 songs. Of these tracks, 118 would make the Billboard Top 10, or 201 when duets were included. For contrast, the Beatles recorded 213 total songs in their career, with 34 top 10s, while Nirvana made 102, with only Smells Like Teen Spirit cracking the top 10. Even Johnny Cash, whose 50-year career saw him release nearly 100 albums, recorded only around 1,500 songs. By the time Murray died in 1955, he averaged 2 to 3 new songs every week of his life. This incredible output is only outpaced by how well they sold. The low-end estimate for his average record sales is 50,000, meaning that the absolute lowest number of records Billy Murray sold was 300 million, with estimates nearing a billion not being out of the question. At his worst, this puts Billy Murray squarely among the top-selling musicians. Despite this juggernaut performance, no one ever mentions him. Even when he died in 1954, he was already nearly forgotten. When John Lennon was killed, it made the front page. When Billy Murray dropped dead at the theater, it's hard to find even on page 23. No matter how big something may seem at the moment, its time in the sun is often short-lived. The biggest stars of yesterday are the sidewalks we walk down at best, and oftentimes much less. Speedrunning is no different. For every Super Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, there's dozens of other speed games that have faded from the public consciousness. Interesting runs that for one reason or another are hardly played anymore. This is the death of speedrunning.
The next game is SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. Every now and then, a game inexplicably takes over the speedrun community, and SpongeBob SquarePants is one of those games.
Few games have seen a monumental rise to popularity like SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. Games from 2003 aren't supposed to suddenly develop communities. Licensed games aren't meant to be taken seriously. Children's games aren't intended to be speedrun. Outside of being a recognizable brand, everything was working against BFAB becoming successful. With everything stacked against it though, the only thing it could do was become undeniable. Over the course of just a few years, BFAB developed a technical depth that few speedruns can compare to. It seemed that with each passing year, a new revolutionary trick would be discovered, changing the game and reinvigorating the community. Whether it was SpongeBob's movement speed being doubled by the discovery of cruise boosting, skee ball abuse creating infinite money, or elbows making walls just a suggestion, BFAB was undergoing a period of rapid and massive change. For a while, this was ridden high. The community would continue to grow, culminating in something no other speedrun has ever achieved. On June 23, 2020, Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated was released as a full remake of the original game, in large part due to the renewed interest through speedrunning. BFBB's longtime world record holder Shift was even put in the game's credits. This remaster and its immediate annihilation brought a ton of attention and new viewers to the original BFBB community. If one were to stop and ask what would happen next, there'd be no reason to expect anything other than continued growth. What instead happened was community-wide fatigue. While a huge crop of new runners was swept in by Rehydrated, many longtime runners quietly made their exit as they needed a break after such a huge peak. As the Rehydrated bubble began to burst, there was no wave on the horizon to sustain intrigue, leading to fewer and fewer active runners. Community members who stopped watching the game for a few months came back to something completely unrecognizable. SpongeBob now flew into the sky, spatulas were duplicated, a level that was once walking was now being completed with super speed bowls and boosts. Cruise boosts just kept getting faster. While BFAB was no stranger to change, it had always progressed linearly. Now, the puzzle had been completely turned on its head. All this occurred while the game was morphing into its most difficult iteration yet. While change is inevitable in life, sometimes it can be too much too soon. A stereotypical way of gauging if a trick is difficult is based on whether or not it's a one frame.
Welcome to
BFBB speedrunning.
How tough are you?
How tough am I? How tough am I? I had a bowling
One frames.
for breakfast this morning.
Yeah, so?
Without any
Practice.
Right this way. Sorry to keep you waiting.
One frames are tricks that must be performed on a single frame of the game, which in Battle for Bikini Bottom means 1/60th of a second. While boiling down the difficulty to these grossly oversimplifies things, let's do it anyways. In the current any % world record route, there are 20 timing-based one frames, meaning that the player needs to react in order to hit them. Additionally, the run performs 25 cruise boosts, which are double frame perfect tricks that require the player to hit 2 buttons on the same frame. There's also 3 ledge cruise boosts, which in addition to needing the player to hit 2 buttons at the same time, also require specific timing to be performed. This sets the total 1 frames in the run at 76, with many of them being an instant reset if they're missed. To underline how difficult this is, every rotation this line makes around the circle is 1 second. When the line makes it fully around the circle, it will turn green for 1 frame. Feel free to try and pause the video on this frame. See how many times you can get it in a row. All in, the story of Battle for Bikini Bottom is too much, too fast. Few games have ever reached such great heights, but in the process, BFBB flew too close to the sun, and the community burned out. Like clockwork, while working on this video, the game changed again. 3 new tricks were discovered, completely changing the run. A new way to duplicate spatulas was developed, requiring talking to an NPC on the same frame you hit them, then be in the middle of buying a spatula from Mr. Krabs when the next text comes up. Do it wrong though, and the game crashes. The other 2 tricks both involve the most difficult form of cruise boosting, an uncapped cruise boost. UCBs are by far the fastest form of cruise boosting in the game, but require angle perfect activation in addition to doing frame perfect inputs on a specific frame. A single UCB would have already been the hardest trick in the run, so 2 being added at once only exacerbates the new layers of difficulty BFBB continually reveals. If Battle for Bikini Bottom is a story of reaching such great heights, Rehydrated is one of stalling at takeoff. The initial speedrun community of brand new games often are a bit seedy. People have hardly played the game, much less figured out its validity as a speedrun, but come launch day, someone will be grinding for world record attempts. In an age of speedrunning documentaries, vultures descend, trying to snatch early world records or discover important yet obvious skips and tricks as a means of etching their usernames into the history scripts. It's usually not until weeks or months go by that a true community dedicated to a game emerges. Rehydrated has the worst possible experience with this. While the original game was slowly whittled down over a series of years, Rehydrated was beaten in under 3 minutes the day it was released. This naturally drew a lot of attention to the game, but it was all short-lived. Most of the people who came were there for intrigue and the novelty of it all. When the hype dried up though, they had little reason to stay. Rehydrated didn't just die from being too fast too soon though. Some say it was bad luck, others say it was murder, but shortly into the game's lifecycle, the boards were wiped clean and the runner count has never recovered. The PC port of Rehydrated was especially problematic to moderate. PC games have the problem of PCs not being standardized, leading to expensive hardware potentially yielding faster loads and higher frame rates. While loads weren't an issue for Rehydrated, frames were. For whatever reason, the developers chose to not cap the frame rate at 60, leading to the game running at up to 146 frames per second depending on PC quality. While this normally isn't too big a deal, the physics engine was tied to the frame rate. Tricks just worked better at 146 FPS. This essentially created a pay-to-win structure, with more expensive PCs leading to faster potential times. This put the moderation team at a difficult crossroads. They eventually made the decision to enforce a 60 FPS cap and remove all the runs that were previously verified on the boards. Over 400 runners were wiped. Over 2 years later, and there are still fewer runners now than there were a week into the game's lifecycle. While it's hard to know for sure if this is what killed Rehydrated speedrunning, the long-term damage is evident. Call of Duty is one of the few series to have achieved near universal recognition regardless of who you're talking to. A big part of its success can be traced back to the Zombies game mode. Zombies is an endless survivor mode where players fend off wave after wave of increasingly durable enemies. While an endless survival game seems like a weird choice for a speedrun, the depth of gameplay led the COD Zombie series to be among the most popular in speedrunning. A large part of the appeal of zombie speedruns is the large number of options. The series has dozens of maps, each presenting their own twist. Want a run that's very simple? Try Nocturne Toten or Shino Numa. Want a map that's designed to be annoying? Transit and Die Rise have that covered. Looking to run the best map Treyarch ever released? Call of the Dead or Origins are both prime contenders. On top of a huge collection of maps to choose from, Zombies has a number of playstyles for speedrunning. Many players will race to a certain round as quickly as possible, requiring good power-up drops and weapon rolls, but it's not enough RNG that it feels unfair. Other runners will speedrun the map's Easter egg, which ranges from really easy to how does anyone figure this out, and makes the goals of the run more structured. A unique factor in Zombies' success though stems from the game being multiplayer. Speedrunning is often a solitary journey. When runners set out for a time, a community may find tricks to speed up the run or keep them company in chat, but no one else can get the time for them. Zombies is different in this regard. Runners can play with friends. Up to 4 people are allowed in a game, with the difficulty scaling based on how many are playing. This can help prevent a grind from becoming too stale, as Misery loves company. All in, the number of ways to speedrun COD Zombies gave it many advantages compared to other speed games, but this hasn't stopped it from declining in popularity. This decline has largely corresponded to a decline in the popularity of Call of Duty as a whole. When the series came onto the scene, the gaming landscape was dominated by single-player platformers with a cartoony mascot. Highly polished military shooters were hard to come by. 2 decades later, and multiplayer shooters are the most dominant genre in the industry. For most of that time, Call of Duty released a new title every year, and while it didn't mean a new Zombies game mode came out every time, Zombies as a series is still spread out across double-digit games. To own every map costs over $1,000. What's even crazier is that it won't get cheaper. Call of the Dead is a DLC map for Black Ops 1. It was released in 2011 for $14.99. A quick look at Steam shows, yep, still $14.99. In contrast, Minecraft costs $26.95. When a single map is more than half that of Minecraft, it's easy to see why someone would choose to run something else instead. Perhaps a bigger issue is that Zombies in particular has likely reached its apex. For the main series, each of the map's Easter eggs built off of each other, telling a story that spanned years and which people grew attached to. In 2019, the story reached its conclusion. While subsequent games have created outshoots to the storyline, sequels rarely hold up to the original. This removes a huge reason why many players continued coming back to Zombies year after year, shrinking the pool of possible runners. Speedrunning Zombies comes more from a love of zombies than from a love of speedrunning. The tide of the franchise as a whole steers the strength of the speedrunning community. When Zombies is doing well, so does speedrunning, but when Zombies stumbles, speedrunning takes the fall. Most of the games on this list are dead in a metaphorical sense. Club Penguin is not. In the most literal sense, Club Penguin died on March 30th, 2017 when it was shut down permanently. Before this happened though, it became one of the most notable speedruns ever. Banned percent is exactly what it sounds like. Players speedrun getting banned as quickly as possible. With the target audience being young kids, Club Penguin had a very strict chat filter. Set off this filter too many times or with too strong of language and your penguin is gone. The rules of the category were simple. Timing began on the first input of the web browser. From there, the player must make a new account, accept the activation email from Club Penguin, and then send something explicit enough to get banned. With the game being shut down, ban percent died along with it, but not without some controversy. A quick look at speedrun.com will show the world record being held by 2KRN4U with a time of 37 seconds 370 milliseconds, as it has been for the past 6 years. But there is one alleged run that claims to be faster. On March 29th, 2017, the day before Club Penguin and ban percent would be terminated, a runner by the name of Came Logical would submit a 33.380 to the boards. Within hours, the run would be met with controversy. In a post made to r/speedrun, another top-level runner by the name of Skilloz would make an incredibly detailed post outlining their suspicion of the run. Skilloz's skepticism is based around 2 key issues: a black box Came Logical edits over part of the screen during the run, and an alleged inconsistency in the time an email was received. 11 seconds into the run, Came Logical is moving tabs around to set up for the email being sent, at which point they black out half of the screen, say, "Lol, you're not getting my Skype or Discord." While this was clearly suspicious, Came Logical would upload footage that removed the box in response to the post. The more serious and harder to explain claim was the time on the email. The time on Came Logical's computer changes to 3:40 PM at 10.933 seconds into the run, and he receives an email at 16.333 seconds. When the email arrives, it is dated to be 12 seconds after 3:40 PM instead of 5 seconds after 3:40. Further testing by Skilloz explored whether the website delivered emails using the time on an internal server, or if the email would pull the time from the user's computer. While Skilloz's testing came to the conclusion that the website was using the user's computer, others would dispute Skilloz's analysis of the website's script, coming to the conclusion that the website did in fact use an internal server for its time. If Skilloz is correct and the website was pulling the time from Came Logical's computer, it's an open and shut case. But if the website had an internal clock, it's possible that it was out of sync with Came Logical's computer, explaining away the missing 7 seconds. In the end though, nothing conclusive was found to show Came Logical had cheated, but their run was never reinstated to the boards. With no possibility to change, 2KRN4U holds the ban percent world record, a time that will never be beaten, unless it already has. But let's go back to Billy Murray for a moment. Maybe there's a reason we forgot about him. Maybe some things are just meant to die with time. Billy Murray was the first person to ever make a living off of recording music, and it sounds like it. Back then, singers would use acoustic horns for recording. Murray excelled at this style of recording because it required lyrics to be sung loudly and spoken clearly. Even in his most successful songs, it's hard to call Billy Murray anything more than a bad singer. More than that though, maybe he just was a bad person. Murray was well known for singing novelty songs. This very often meant using stereotypical ethnic accents, and that was when they were at their least offensive. In order to get his shot as a recording artist, Murray worked his way up through the minstrel circuits, which was a theatrical show largely built around derogatory depictions of African Americans and the use of blackface. A charitable view is that Billy Murray is a product of a backwards era, but at every step in the process, he comes up short. Despite everything that was working in his favor, as time progressed, the decisions he made along the way made it harder and harder for anyone to support him. This is all an imperfect analogy to how Luigi's Mansion 3 speedrunning died. In an age where any glitch can be patched out by a developer who cares enough, no speedrun is safe. Luigi's Mansion 3 takes place in a hotel, with each floor serving as a level for Luigi to clear. On the 4th floor, Luigi encounters the pianist ghost. Normally, this fight takes about 5 minutes to finish, but through the use of a tech known as Luigi pushing, Luigi can get onto the stage early. From here, he can enter a door that will trigger an autosave, which, if done after a certain part of the boss fight, allows you to reload with the rest of the fight being skipped. This saves nearly 2.5 minutes. The only issue is, Nintendo patched it. Nearly half a year after the game was released, Nintendo removed access to the door early, making the trick impossible on the newest version of the game. While games often create different categories for game versions, the Switch is especially annoying to run older versions of games on it as it requires factory resetting the system, wiping all the data saved to it. It wasn't just that updating removed the single skip though, it just made the run worse in general. Combat in the game revolves around Luigi trapping ghosts in a vacuum. While this does a steady trickle of damage, slamming ghosts causes dramatic drops in their health, greatly speeding up capture. While the mechanic used to work fine, it will now randomly decide to do no damage, creating potential for time loss at every part of the game. Perhaps what killed LM3 more than anything though was practicing. The game made it so inconvenient to practice. You're unable to skip cutscenes until you've beaten the game on your Switch profile. This doesn't seem that bad until you notice that there are only 3 save files. In order to have a save file set to practice each part of the game, you need to beat the game on 6 different profiles. Another thing that doesn't seem like too big of a deal until you explore a little more is the inability to copy save files. Luigi's Mansion only uses autosaving, so once you've used a practice file, you can't reuse it. To explain further, the autosaves actually have their own save system. At the bottom, there's the story checkpoint save, which starts at the very beginning of each new floor. This is useful since now you can practice the floor over and over. The problem arises when you progress to the next floor, as this overwrites the previous floor's story checkpoint, making it virtually unusable. This often led to hours being invested for only minutes of practice. In short, Luigi's Mansion 3 had the pieces of a good speedrun, but small decisions made by the developers led to a death by 1,000 cuts. Not all deaths are dramatic though, sometimes things just fade away. The story of speedrunning cannot be told without SM64, but SM64's story is defined by one man. Siglemic is nothing short of a legend at this point. Although speedrunning began long before he picked up a controller, Siglemic largely represents the birth of speedrunning. Even though he last set the 120-star world record in April of 2014 and all but retired not long after, his impact is still being felt. If you were to ask an entire generation of SM64 runners what got them into the game, they would universally agree it was Siglemic. His impact on speedrunning is probably best seen in August of 2012. During that month, Siglemic decided to speedrun every day for 12 hours. Over the course of that grind, he averaged around 4,000 viewers. While 4,000 is an impressive number to this day, I want to take a moment to put this into perspective. Average concurrent viewers is a metric that takes the mean number of people watching something over a given duration. The earliest data available for Twitch's average concurrent viewership comes from September 2012, 1 month after Siglemic's grind. That month, Twitch had an AVC of 77,764 viewers across the entirety of the platform, meaning that on average, 77,764 people were watching Twitch at any given time that month. Twitch was experiencing a massive growth period at this time, so it wouldn't be unreasonable if the average in August was in the 50 or 60 thousands, but let's just say it was the same as September. That would mean for every 20 people on Twitch, one of them was watching Siglemic, and that was on average. When he set a new 120-star world record on August 5th, 14,000 people were watching his stream. If someone were to match Siglemic's numbers in modern times, they'd be streaming to an average of 120,000 people for 12 hours a day. In essence, it'd be hard to find anyone who watched Twitch and didn't know Siglemic. The reach he had single-handedly propelled speedrunning forward more than anyone before and since. He didn't just matter to the speedrunning community though, he mattered to the entirety of live streaming. When he set a world record, Twitch itself would celebrate it. When Twitch held an event, they had Siglemic come and speedrun at them. When the partnership program began, Siglemic was one of the first 10 accepted into it. In every way, Siglemic was a golden boy of Twitch's earliest era. And then he left. First he decided to stop speedrunning, and then eventually he stopped streaming. Someone who once streamed nearly 400 hours in a single month has not hit go live since December 2019, and no one since him has come close to his notoriety. It's impossible to know what would have happened if Siglemic had just kept running SM64, but one thing for sure is that the day he stopped playing was the day that speedruns died. In Rome, the highest honor a military commander could receive was a triumph. A triumph was essentially a giant parade around the city with Romans coming out to celebrate the general's victories in battle. People who received triumphs were made to feel like kings and gods. They were also constantly reminded of the inevitability of their death. Memento mori is a phrase that means remember that you must die. It was meant to keep Romans humble, as for however great they may be in life, death awaits everyone. Throughout the entirety of celebrating his triumph, a slave was brought with the general to whisper the phrase into his ear, to let him know that even at his peak, he is only approaching death. Super Mario Bros. Is not a dead speedrun. It's long been one of the most vibrant and progressive communities in all of speedrunning. But at least for the any percent category, it's approaching death. The last second barrier was broken back in 2021, and now, standing at 454.798, there are just frames left to save. Few games have a hard limit in the way SMB1 does. Stop and subscribe if you've heard of this one before, but imagine a bus. SMB1 has something known as a frame rule. Rather than checking to see if you finished a level every single frame, the game only checks every 21 frames, or one frame rule. This means that it doesn't matter what time you finished a level within that window, as the game will not progress you until it checks at the end of the frame rule. The well-known example used to illustrate this is a bus station. If a bus departs every half hour, it doesn't matter if you arrive 20 minutes or 20 seconds before departure. You'll still have to wait until the half hour is up, since the bus leaving is not dependent on when you arrive. The one exception to this rule is 8-4, the game's final level. In that stage, timing ends when Mario touches the axe, so it's possible to save or lose time in non-frame rule increments. All that's left to save in any percent is 32 frames, a single frame rule in 4.2 and 11 frames in 8.4, before humans have tied the theoretical human limit, 0.533 seconds away from Triumph and Memento Mori. So why haven't these segments been perfected yet? Starting with 4.2, this is arguably the most storied level in SMB1 speedrunning. 4.2 is a warp zone level, allowing players to skip ahead in the game. When this block here is hit, a vine will sprout up, leading Mario into the loading zone where the warp pipes are located. This pipe here is also a load zone, this time going into an underground room with coins. The way the game knows where to warp the player is based on the position of the screen. Once the center of the screen has passed this point, the game switches from the vine warp to the pipe warp. If you enter the pipe while the center of the screen is to the left of this line, a wrong warp occurs, taking Mario to the warp zone instead. Doing this skips the vine animation, allowing Mario to begin moving seconds earlier. Normally, Mario's in the center of the screen, so it's necessary to offset the camera for Mario. The way this is currently done is by clipping into the wall, which causes the game to pull Mario to the right until he begins moving again. Unfortunately, wall clipping causes Mario to slow down quite a bit, making the strategy unviable for saving the final frame rule. What instead needs to be done is the bump strategy. By bumping into a block, both Mario and the screen stop moving for a moment, but Mario begins moving again before the screen continues to scroll, allowing Mario's position to be offset from the center, in increments of 7 to 11 pixels per bump, depending on the setup. At least 2 bumps are required, since Mario needs to bump 20 pixels to the right in order to have a 1 pixel window on the pipe where wrong warping is possible. The most likely way this will be achieved in a run is by getting an 11 pixel bump on this question mark block, then setting up a second bump on the pipe itself. For the pipe bump to work, Mario needs to land at the perfect spot, then perform a 1 frame wall jump to land 20 pixels offset, leaving a 1 pixel opening on the pipe. While this trick has a few different possible input combinations, it's essentially perfect throughout. Hold a button a frame too long, or jump tap a frame too late, and the trick fails. That said, it will likely be in the runs one day. Current record holder Nifsky spent time grinding the trick, and set his sights getting in 3 times in a row. After going back to back many times, he would eventually get it 5 times in a row, in what he describes as one of the biggest flukes. While it's certainly difficult and there's no telling when it'll happen, it'll be more surprising if a world record was never set with the trick than if it was. In fact, both Nifsky and Miniland have been tied with the task out of 4.2, so maybe it'll happen sooner than expected. The other stage that hasn't been perfected is 8.4. As the exception to the rule, every frame matters in 8.4, so gameplay has to be perfect. In fact, the current world record actually features the best 8.4 ever in a world record. Going room by room, Nifsky loses 4 frames in room 1, 1 in room 2, 4 in room 3, and 2 in Bowser for a total of 11 frames. Each of these time losses comes from missing some variant of a fast acceleration. Mario accelerates backwards more quickly than moving forwards. By holding left on the first frame, then releasing for one frame before holding right and tapping A on the next frame, Mario can reach running speed sooner. Room 1 requires a more complicated approach though. The stage ideally begins with an imperfect fast acceleration, which is holding left on the first frame, then immediately doing right and A on the next frame, without the empty frame in between. This sets up for a falling fast acceleration on the next step. For this, runners have to hold right until landing on the step, then release for a frame before doing right left right on consecutive frames. Doing both these accelerations perfectly would save 4 frames over Nifsky's run. It's worth noting at this point what an NES controller looks like. The D-pad is not made up of individual buttons. Holding left prevents the player from also pressing right. This makes it so you need to release and press buttons within the window of one frame. Room 2 also features a fast XL/falling fast XL combo. For this one, there are actually 3 different button combinations that work, but each results in a different sub-pixel position, requiring slightly different approaches to the wall jump and subsequent pipe entry. The result of all that is saving a single frame compared to the world record. Room 3 differs slightly, requiring a double fast XL in the beginning. The first fast XL is a normal one, but after landing back on the pipe, you need to do right, left, right plus A. This room also contains the closest thing to a mistake by Nifsky, as the turnaround into the pipe lost a bit of time. If done perfectly, 4 frames can be saved here. The water room is much easier in comparison to the rest of the level, with the world record tying the task already. Finally, the 2 frames in Bowser can be saved by doing the same fast XL combination as room 2 used. All in, to save these 11 frames, runners have to do 32 frame-perfect inputs in a 44-second level. While other games have been optimized to their limit, no game as popular or as notable as Super Mario Bros. 1 is as close. By no means does any percent being perfected mean that people will stop running SMB1, but as it stands, it is frames approaching death.